Aside from just trying to give you some simple reports, the real purpose of this exercise is community communication. Look boring, or we don't make it through fast enough, or if there's an item that's brought up that's of interest, that's what's critical, not some stupid bunch of reports in PowerPoint. And the mic is always open, and there's one there, and Bill has one he can carry around and people can eat or whatever. Okay, steering committee report, pretty quick. What have we been spending our time on? Getting the amendments together. You'll see in the election process there's some proposed amendments to the charter, and the only amendments have been proposed by the steering committee. There were none from the community, which is okay. Most of them are just cleanups of the original charter. Was a lot of startup language, stuff like that. So this is mostly cleanups. The mailing list archive frou-for-all, which I'm sure you've all heard enough of and seen enough of. The question of editing the archive. The interim PC and MLC appointments, we had to make a couple. Those were done by normal process and were dull and boring, but I think Marty, among others, had questions about them. Marty, you live in here?
He's not here yet.
No, Marty?
He'll be in at 6:30. Plain call. He said he'd call me when he got here.
Bummer. Where's the fun? Oh well. Mailing list AUP regarding autoresponders, we had some discussion on that and have thrown it back to the mailing list committee because we felt it was too specific to a specific technology. So that's kind of back on your plate, Rob and gang.
If I could just briefly to that, I would love to have.
Why don't you use a microphone? Presume you want to do it during the mailing list committee song?
After we give our report, I'd love to have an open discussion.
Right. Great. And then just the normal garbage about helping merit arrange meetings and other logistics and stuff like that. It's been a nice boring time. We like boring times. The idea that the steering committee has is being pretty minimal and staying out of micromanaging the internet. Future meetings, there's February in Toronto. The spring meeting will be in Hellevue, Washington. Some call it Bellevue. And the October meeting's in Albuquerque with Aaron. And don't ask me what that S is at the end. Charter changes, we've discussed them to death on NANOG Futures. Please read them, please vote. The steering committee, of course, thinks you should like the amendments the steering committee proposed. That's a no-brainer. The usual slide on what the mailing lists are. Come on, by now you know them all. NANOG is where you post questions about why everybody needs mailing lists, etc. So, and that's the story. The next is, unless people want to specifically beat up the steering committee, which we deserve, the next is the program committee. If Steve would care to jack in. Oh, should we switch? Do you want to switch agenda so you can be ready here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Who wants to be next? No, over here, Betty. This cord's a little short. No, this cord.
I'll trip and do my usual.
Oh, I set that trap purposefully.
Okay, y'all know who I am. Y'all know what I do, but there's my, oh, sorry. My usual sort of start off giving some acknowledgments. Really, NANOG has evolved into what we're really working on transparency, and it really does take a lot of involvement at Merit, of course, to host these activities, but a lot of work with the SCPC and the list admins. It is work to put this activity together and put the meetings together, and I really do want to take just a moment and thank everyone. The steering committee, we have conference calls every 2 weeks. We're now getting them down to an hour, which is great. And I know that Steve has a number of program committee calls, plus just the time that the program committee members spend. It's not insignificant. And the list admins, when we started the evolution process a couple years ago, and I asked for volunteers to help us then, to today with the current list that are supporting the team members that are supporting the list, it's not insignificant. They have to read all of the email. And on behalf of Merit, I just want to thank all of our volunteers. No one gets paid. No one gets any extra waiver fees or anything else for their time. They really are volunteers on behalf of all of us. Just to give you an indication, I like to report on who from Merit is attending, who's not working. Don Welsh, our new CEO, is here. Mary McLaughlin, who is the director of our statewide regional networking activities. Janice Short, who is responsible for financial information this time, is joining us as well at the meeting. So if we have financial issues that aren't just mine, we have another person to ask questions of. Glenn Wilsey and Bert Rossi, both from our engineering staff and our regional networking folks. Back home in Ann Arbor this time, I would like to say special thank you to Brad Robertson, Jeff Tomaszewski, and Todd White. These folks did a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes, putting together the voting and registration process. I know it was a little clunky this time getting through the get your ID, get your password to register for the meeting, but it really is helping us create a database that we've all wanted to have for this organization so that we can get better reporting, and it helped us get to voting. It makes voting easier. These folks did a lot of work behind the scenes. And then clearly to mention the NANOG Merit staff on site. Some new folks, some old folks. David Gilbertson, Rick Reinecke, and Larry Blunk are doing a lot of the networking things for the meeting this time, a lot of logistics because we host with Aaron. They've done a lot of work. Carol Wadsworth and Dawn are back doing NANOG registration and meeting logistics. They do a great job. Val is supporting Steve in the program committee and all the website information, so if you have questions, need quick turnaround on the website, Val is here doing a great job. And then Jason Russell in the back, always doing our web broadcast, doing a fantastic job. So Sue Joyner is at home this time, and she's getting to rest because the list admin team are all here doing their job. Thanks to our host here for this meeting, Savas and Washington University in St. Louis. I was telling someone a few minutes ago, it's been really great to be in an academic town again. We always have some volunteers. I'll be quick. I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I know you guys want to go. But it's been great fun. Putting these meetings together get really sort of logistic, and I don't want to call them boring, but we go through the same process. And being in an academic town and having student volunteers was really great. So thanks to all for the free help this time. Thanks to our contributors, folks who just are there that we're able to count on. Tony's doing the wireless network for us again. Dwayne isn't here in person, but we're using Dwayne's equipment. And thanks to our folks back at the Internet too, because they're doing some broadcast exchange for us back in Ann Arbor for the meeting. Sorry to report, we have no break sponsors this time. So what that means when we don't have break sponsors is we get lighter lunch snackies. But we have great beer and gear sponsors, so we'll have a great reception. And thanks to all of them. Just to give you some updates in terms of what's been happening in my life and others back at Merit. Our new CEO has arrived, Don Welsh. We're all getting to know each other. Don's here. Hopefully you'll get to know him as well. He'll be making a presentation tomorrow morning in the opening remarks and staying with us throughout the meeting and joining us for some committee meeting breakfasts and lunch. As I said earlier, the big thing that we've been doing at Merit that I've been overseeing since our last meeting is trying to work with Dan and the other authors of the charter amendments to turn the charter changes into a readable format that you can vote on. So we've been taking a bunch of text and putting it into a way in which you can vote on these charter revisions. Again, as I said, dealing with the registration process, getting the SC nominations. This is our second time at voting, and I think it's really important for the community itself to engage in the process. So I've been doing a little marketing, if you will, trying to get SC nominations, which we now have. They're complete. We're in the process of receiving program committee nominations. That's still open. So as we look ahead at future meetings, it's really important for all of you to reflect and think about who you would like to represent the program committee. The nominations are open. And voting begins on Monday. If you haven't gone to the website to make sure that you're an eligible voter and that you have your password and ID, please do so before noon tomorrow. That's when voting starts. And there could be a rush if you haven't done all your homework, got all your passwords, for us to be able to respond and see what's wrong. Then, if you go to the NANOG webpage, under the info section, the slides that I've been putting together at previous meetings and the slides that I'm going to show here are on the webpage. Certainly be willing to take questions, but I think Randy and the steering committee would really rather us kind of breeze through some of these so that if you have questions, we can talk about it at the end of the meeting, or you can look at the material that's out on the website and reflect. This is just the report from NANOG 37 in San Jose. The numbers are the numbers. I think the biggest issue in terms of why we see a negative 31,000 there for the total of the meeting is that our revenue predictions were a little light. We didn't have the kind of attendance that we were hoping for in San Jose, and we had $105,000 of hotel expenses. As some of you remember from our discussions in San Jose, it took quite a bit to put together the network connections in the conference center, or the conference center there, and they just balanced the way they did. I thought I would give you an update on the FY06 actuals. You can go to the website again and see what the predictions were and compare these numbers for yourself. But in general, the revenue was, for the total year, the revenue was up just a little bit, but certainly not where we had hoped it would be. Salary expenses were up a little bit because we had some vacation and other kinds of salary expenses that we had to pay out at the end of the year. In our non-salary expenses, again, that's where the hotel contracts are, was up more than we had anticipated. But the good news is, as everything balanced out, instead of looking at a loss for the year, we have a balance of $32,000 in the account. That's good news, but what this all says, and everyone should again look at these numbers, is we don't have a lot of wiggle room. There's not a lot of reserves setting in the account to be able to handle future meetings that don't meet revenue targets. As Randy said, my last slide is where our future meetings are, and one of the things that we've committed to at Merit so that we could get venue information out earlier so all of you could plan on attending is to, really work hard on hotel contracts and to get dates out. So February 4th through 7th is where we are going to host NANOG 39 in Toronto. Very excited about the venue, and a lot of things going on in Toronto in February, and Joe Abley has done a great job in getting a number of volunteers to help us work through those issues. June 10th through the 13th, I'm not able to announce our host yet and or the location for sure. It did not work out for us to go to Florida as we had hoped at our last meeting. I am 95% sure this time, however, when saying we're going to Bellevue, Washington. I do not have a signed contract or a signed agreement with the host, but we're really, really close. I'm much more comfortable to say those are the dates. October 7th, 17th through the 19th. Actually, yeah, okay, that is right here. I'm sorry. Again, our back-to-back meeting with Aaron, as Randy indicated, we are expecting to go to Albuquerque, but I have not signed the hotel contract yet, nor has our colleagues from Aaron. But Aaron has the dates up on their website, and we'll be posting ours here shortly in just a sec. So that's my presentation, and I guess we'll take questions at the end? Or now?
Well, yeah, so I have one question on that. Obviously, when you plan meetings further out in advance than historically we've been able to, right? I mean, you actually know where you're going to be more or less in 2 meetings. That gives you, more leverage on contracts and perhaps better control over costs.
Yep.
But how does it, is it also an obstacle in terms of handicapping the numbers for the meeting because you're trying to project that out 2 meetings when you're working on contracts versus, if you were just working on the next one? Because obviously projecting the number of people that are going to attend a given meeting has historically been fairly hard, and I can't imagine that it's any easier now.
Would you like to take my job, Joel?
No, I'm actually asking you, does this make your job harder or easier?
It's a trade-off.
Yeah.
It's easier to have known dates because instead of having to scramble and work really hard between meetings to get another venue lined up, it's been really tough working really hard to get 3 in a row, a lot of work right now, but that part will calm down. There's more of a risk for Carol, actually, Carol Wadsworth, who does a lot of the hotel negotiating with the contracts. So she has to be really creative and work really hard to get the room blocks and those kind of things to our advantage. So it's easier for me for venues. It's a little bit more risky and more difficult because we're signing for hotels that want money right now to sign up for, and we're counting on a great attendance. So the risk is we've got dates out there, which is easy, that's great. We've got room blocks committed. The risk is if we don't hit those targets.
Yeah, exactly. And I sympathize with you, but yeah, I guess it's just making people aware that that is definitely a liability.
It is. Thank you, Joel.
Thanks, Betty. Now Steve's going to have a shot at the program committee report. By the way, I'm really looking forward to the Toronto meeting. I know people have questions about Toronto in February. There are no black flies. No black flies. And Toronto is the best city of the Midwest of this continent. It really is.
Okay, how do I follow that? All right, I'm Steve Feldman, Program Committee Chair. I'll keep this brief. This is pretty much a rerun of the reports that I've given before, except the numbers have changed. As usual, all the opinions that I expressed here are mine, and all the hard work is done by the other program committee members, so we need to thank them. First thing, we have a new member on the program committee. Jen Rexford had to resign over the summer because she realized she couldn't be in too many places at the same time. So Nick Feimster has been selected as her replacement, so now he gets to discover the same thing. Nick is also from a university academic background and keeps that valuable viewpoint on the program committee. The program for this time, we had 32 submissions, which is down from the 37 we had in San Jose. Of those, we accepted 19, declined 10, declined another one because it was incomplete. I don't remember exactly why, probably no slides. And we had 2 that were submitted too late to be considered because we had already filled the available time. So those don't count among the 10 that were declined. Usual areas for improvement, these haven't really changed since last time, so you can consider that. The program format this time is a bit different from the last two. We're back to the Sunday through Tuesday format because we're running this in conjunction with the EARN meeting, which has Wednesday through Friday. So as usual, we have the tutorials today, the BOFs tomorrow. One thing we're doing a bit different, I had a really good idea to try doing informal BOFs. We're going to have 1 or 2 rooms available about this size tomorrow. In fact, I think this might be one of the rooms that you can sign up for. If you want to have a BOF on some subject that you think is interesting, you can stick your name on the board for a 1-hour time slot in the evening, and the room's yours. We can send out, oh, Betty, do you have some? Oh, yeah, part of that is if you need a projector or anything, you need to talk to Betty, because it's not going to be here otherwise, because they don't want to babysit them. And yeah, we'll send something out on the mailing list probably to announce what the BOFs are. We haven't really thought that through too well. So the program goes through about 5 o'clock on Tuesday, as we did in the old schedule. Starting again next time, the non-EARN conjoined meetings will be back to the Monday through Wednesday schedule, because that has turned out to be reasonably popular. Lightning talks, same as last time, except we slid the schedule a day early because the meeting ends on Tuesday. So signups are open now for lightning talks. Tomorrow evening, the program committee will decide which crackpot ideas you guys would most like to hear about, and they'll present Tuesday morning. Usual feedback, you can talk to us. We're wearing interestingly colored badges. Let's see, yellow or green, it says for program committee. You can send us mail at NANOG PC. You can discuss things in public at NANOG Futures. And third thing you can do this time of year is volunteer to be on the program committee yourself. As Betty mentioned, nominations are now open through, I think, Wednesday. Once the new steering committee is seated, they'll be selecting the new program committee from among the nominees. So this is your chance to have some say on what you seen here. There are 8 terms expiring on the program committee. All of them are eligible to be renewed, so hopefully they'll all renominate themselves. And of course, anybody else who is nominated is considered along with these. I know at least 1 or 2 of these who I think are going to be stepping down, but we'll see how that goes. And then here's the normal open discussion slide. If you guys want to talk here in this meeting, here's some ideas, things like we could talk about. And that's it. So any questions of me or of the PC in general? Good, I like that. Thanks.
Who's giving the mailing list committee report? Chris. I'll give it back to him.
Hi, I'm Chris Malater from the mailing list committee. Going to run through this pretty quick. We don't have all that much new this time. Agenda. We do have 2 new members on our committee that the steering committee appointed since the last meeting. David Barak and Brett Watson have joined our committee. Nobody has left yet in a while. Do we have them here? Are you guys here? Not that they'll admit to. Steve is not here. And Sue, our fabulous merit liaison representative extraordinaire, is back home resting. Much needed rest for Sue. Our process flow has not changed. It's still the same as all of the meetings that you've come to so far. Our pending AUP edition for TDMA, whitelisting, vacation, autoresponders, all combined into one, was submitted to the steering committee, and they have apparently sent it back to us, which I just found out about today. I apologize for that. We will be talking about it in our committee over the next few weeks, and we will be putting ideas out for new proposed wording to NANOG Futures, and we will be going from there. Also, Rob has asked to have a discussion about that particular issue after my presentation, and we'll do a little bit on that. The emergency actions and the emergency action addition to the AUP, I do not believe we've gotten anything back from the steering committee yet on this proposed amendment. So that's still pending them. You did. This was submitted to you
I'm telling you, we asked 3 weeks ago. When
and I'm
we
telling you I
considered
sent it
that
to you
proposal.
after, I don't care, I'm telling you I sent it to you after San Jose. List statistics, they're published on the NANOG website. You can see them as well, but it's a little bit down from the last meeting, but not too much of a change in terms of the number of posts nor the number of subscribers. Subscribers to the other lists are relatively static. In terms of administrative actions that we've taken, we've had, let's see, 2 warnings and 1 ban in the time frame since the last meeting, and 16 warnings and 3 bans year to date. AUP is always available on the website and has not changed yet. And in terms of how all of our actions that you saw on the second or the slide 2 previous broke down, all of them were related to aliases and not using real names. Questions?
You said something in there that maybe you answered my question already. I just didn't hear it. The 16 warnings, could you put some flavor on that?
They've been, I just put a year to date in terms of that. In terms of how they broke down in previous meetings, those were identified in those meetings. If you go back to the website, you can see how they're broken down by topic from previous meetings. In terms of what's happened from the last meeting, in the 3 months since the last meeting, there's only been 2 warnings and 1 ban.
And
I don't have the detail for everything since January.
I guess the 3 bans were the things that have in the past jumped out.
Yep. I don't know what the 2 previous were. I only know what happened this time. It was a user who would not change their alias.
Okay, and I see Steve stepping up. Is this related to this question?
Go on.
Okay, the last thing, and I was curious about the interaction between you and Randy about the charter amendment. It sounds like you're saying you passed it to the SC. Randy's saying the SC's never gotten it. And there seems like...
I will gladly go back and find my sent mail.
I said the SC specifically said 4 weeks ago when we had scheduled to discuss this 3 weeks ago, asked the mailing list committee for all proposed changes to the AUP they had in queue. They sent the 1. I re-asked, are there any others? There was no response other than from Rob, who seems to act as chair most of the time, that no, there were no others.
The chair doesn't get invited to the meetings, but that's okay, Randy.
Maybe
Anyway,
there's a reason.
I think what we're seeing here is a little bit of the friction that I was hoping we could eventually get out in the open and get corrected.
I don't know that this meeting is necessarily the place to have this discussion.
Fair point.
Thank you.
I noticed you say there were 0 warnings in September, and it certainly looked to me from reading the list as if September was kind of as bad as I'd seen it in a long time, as far as lots and lots of people screaming at each other about various things that had more to do with not liking people than with network operations at all. And I'm wondering what the reasoning in not doing any warnings during that was.
Sometimes we'll send email as individual contributors off the list suggesting that perhaps people might look at the AUP and think about it and not warn them. And a lot of times that can shape things into cutting down on that. It's when you get into a runaway on the list, it's a difficult thing to go into. The year-to-date zero public threat interventions, when we have to go on the list and say this threat is now dead, please stop it. That's when we've failed in terms of working behind the scenes to make sure that people kind of calm down and come back to rationality in terms of the discussion on the list. So a lot of times there's private discussions that don't necessarily constitute a warning, but constitute a, we'd like to just chat with you about something.
Yeah, just to add on to that, that's something that I've always all along felt was sort of an inadequacy in the way that we report things, which is that there's, the question is when does something become a warning? And the answer is that it's when we say we're warning you, as opposed to the way that most of our mail starts out, which is, gee, we'd really appreciate it if you would look at our AUP and conduct yourself, blah, 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 blah. Right, and most of the time that takes care of the situation. Now I'll grant you that September was a bad month, okay? And I sent some stuff out to people privately that said, look, you know, without my mailing list admin hat on, or even with my mailing list admin hat on, gee, we would really like you to be cool, right? So that often doesn't get counted. The problem is that the previous way of doing things had a certain level of convenience to it, the same way that Mussolini having the trains run on time did, you understand. Acting unilaterally and in a heavy-handed fashion is something that we try to avoid, even when the situation really tempts us to do so on a personal level. And I think I should just leave it at that, we would like some thoughts from anyone in the community who cares to stand up to the microphone and say exactly where they think we ought to get involved. Maybe we're being too laid back about it. Maybe we're not being mean enough about it. Sir.
What did you learn from September? In other words, September, as Steve said, September was a pretty...
Is this turned on?
September's not unique.
No, but September was a pretty noisy month.
It's not unique.
Thank you. We had a September last year, too. I think the general membership on the whole felt September was not a great month. And I'm just wondering, as the mailing list committee, you poor guys, and it's all guys, unfortunately, had the task of dealing with that. And what lessons, what would you like different? What would you like different in the AUP? What would you like different in processes? What did you learn from the members? You know, lessons learned from worst month in a while.
I wish I had a good answer for you to that. Aside from personal frustration, I don't really have a good answer for lessons learned.
From the inception of the mail committee, we've gone from months that have been almost as hectic as this to very quiet months. And we've gone from being very heavy-handed at first to being very laid back and to being kind of middle of the road now, maybe a little bit more towards the laid back side as the pendulum swings. There is no magic recipe to this list. There is no perfect way to deal with it.
And it is arguable that we've been too laid back lately. And if the community thinks that we're too laid back lately, by all means step up to the mic and take us to task for that.
Well,
let's take a straw poll. That's great.
I mean, I just wanted...
Hold on one second before you go down that path. Straw poll of who thinks that the mailing committee has been too lax in intervening in threads lately. 1, 2. Marty's here. So predominantly not. Okay. Okay, let's go the other way. How many people think that the mailing list committee has been doing an effective job at, or too harsh?
Yeah.
Too harsh. How many people think we're too harsh? Has not been too lax. Okay, so a lot of people aren't raising their hands. That's fair.
Yeah.
Probably about the same number.
I mean,
Everybody who is awake and paying attention to the conversation, raise your hand, please. Okay, just making sure.
Now, Joel was first.
Okay, I just wanted to observe in response to, the issue of, the original straw poll question is, it's my perception that the reasons that the mailing list committee was created for have been addressed, right? The original problem was that mailing list moderation was perceived as arbitrary and somewhat capricious, right? And to the extent, I mean, the evidence is up there, right? We have one ban, out of the whole year, and we don't see a lot of people having major complaints about that ban, right? So
3 through the year. 3 through the year, 1 through the period.
oh, okay. Yeah, 3 for the year, 1 for the period. So I think in that respect we've succeeded, right? Now the question is, have we gone too far, I suppose? But we actually addressed the situation that the mailing list committee was created to deal with.
I just have to ask, because I'm seeing a lot of folks not get engaged in the discussion, and I see all the email, and I also see from Sue how many people are unsubscribing and how many people are subscribing. So what the total number of the list membership is. How many in this room really feel that NANOG is the kind of relevant, heartbeat, important email list that it used to be? How many really feel that it's really important, that you have to have NANOG at nanog.org working all the time and that you count on the email coming through? Raise your hand. How many?
That's a different question.
Okay. One at a time. How many people really count on NANOG having relevant information to the operator community in it? How many see it being really relevant? Now. How many people still notice if nanog.org isn't working?
I don't think I'm going to go there.
So, as everybody can probably guess from my having asked the first question, I was definitely in the camp of being at least surprised at sort of laxness of current enforcement. But having had the mailing list committee's job, I know it is a very difficult one. And one of the things that I think became fairly obvious to me when I was on the committee was that telling people to, I think one of the big problems the list has is that there's so much shouting at each other that it's very hard to get any, if somebody does say something useful, it gets lost in the noise. But at the same time, I think one of the lessons I learned from being on that committee for a while was that telling people to shut up isn't enough, because what you can do there is you can create perhaps a quieter list and less irrelevant stuff, but that doesn't cause people to start posting useful stuff. And I remember probably 8 or 9 years ago when I first joined the list, I joined it because things would happen on the network and I'd need to know about them to do my job. They would save me troubleshooting time to know that there is an outage somewhere, and that's why that's why I'm seeing whatever I'm seeing. And I think there are still see some of that mostly on individual exchange point operator mailing lists and so forth, and very occasionally on NANOG. But I think there's much less now that's really being posted that's useful to the operation of networks. And so I think part of the issue is that, yeah, a lot of the off-topic stuff needs to stop, but part of the issue is that there need to be people posting good stuff to it as well. And I'm wondering if there are some structural changes, perhaps making it easier to sort what goes where or something like that, that would spur more of that on, or if that's just a lost cause.
I need to fess up. The SC and last meeting was San Jose. Is that where we met? Somewhere. San Jose, yeah. Specifically raised the issue of the usefulness, content, and viability of the mailing list. And raised it with the mailing list committee and also with the program committee. Thanks. And maybe in part guilty for encouraging the mailing list committee to be a little more lax, and also pushed on the don't jump on people when they post a Cisco or Juniper or Procket specific question, because we all use one of those. It's operations. If we told people for any particular router vendor or any particular carrier or any particular X, go to that list, there is no need for the NANOG list. And we specifically also pushed on the how about constructive responses and so on and so forth. And I think a significant number of the members of the community are trying to do that. And everybody's help would be appreciated. I, for one, though I found September annoying, my personal criterion is, was the noise such that it prevented good signal? And this did not prevent good signal. There were just very few good signals being sent. So therefore, I'm not personally, as a private citizen, unhappy with what you guys did or didn't do.
Well, before we hand it back to Chris, I'd just like to throw out a personal plea to all of you who are in here who obviously are interested in the community and in the mailing list and such. One of the things that I have noticed, and I'm sure everyone else has noticed, is that it's very easy to end up with an 80 or 90 message thread about something that is irrelevant and off topic, where the topic of discussion is whether it is relevant or on topic for the mailing list. And I realize that when something annoys you, it is very tempting to jump in there and say, you know, that's really stupid, would you please not post this on the list? And just as we on the mailing list committee have tried to restrain that first urge to reach through the X term and grab somebody by the throat, not that I have anybody in particular in mind, but I would beg everyone's indulgence in thinking twice before you hit reply to something that you know is off topic or believe is off topic, because you're adding to the problem. I would like nothing more than to see 80 or 90 message long threads about problems with bind, problems with Cisco equipment, problems with a particular vendor's transmission gear having security holes in it, or what have you. It may not be perceived as on topic to everybody. One of the reasons why we have not gone after discussions about botnets, for instance, which I personally think is wandering pretty far afield, but there are people who believe that it is on topic. But there's stuff that is obviously just so far out there that nobody agrees that it's on topic, and that seems to be the things that get the biggest and longest threads on them. So I would like to ask for everybody's assistance in that. Thank you. Back to Chris.
Actually, you can keep your microphone, because you wanted to talk about the... Are you finished? Our report is done unless anybody else has any questions for us.
One last comment was, you have to realize that the mailing list committee people suffer more than anybody else. They have to read the entire mailing list. Think about that for a minute.
Rob, did you want to talk about that? Yes, I do. Okay, cool.
Do you have that? Do you have that proposal on? Yeah, can you get the original proposal we had up there? The proposal was the yeah, that one.
Do other people have hot issues? Because we're thinking, let this go on for half an hour and then at most, and then devote the last half hour to the election stuff. Is that okay with people, or do people have other hot topics? Don't want to run over anybody's dog.
Gosh, that's a long AUP edition. I guess I'll have to take the blame for having written that as a proposal. And I guess the steering committee really brought up a really relevant point when they said that this, although there were varying levels of support for the sentiment embodied in it, that this sort of proposal that named specific stuff was a good way to get into little niggling arguments about whether a particular activity was something that was prohibited by it. And the original idea was that we didn't want people posting to the mailing list and getting a whole bunch of stuff back into their mailbox as a result of having posted to the mailing list. The problem is, as Vijay says, it does not scale. And if you have 150 or 200 or 500 or maybe even 1,000, God forbid, people who decide to run vacation or decide to implement TMDA, so that the mailing list is going through it. Now remember, this is not going back to the mailing list. This is going back to the individual poster of the mailing list, to a message that goes to the mailing list. But the result is that you get a whole bunch of email back. Now, to date, in terms of actual operational issues, this hasn't been much of a problem, but it's something that people complain about. And I tend to agree that it's an annoying thing for people to do, that you should just unsubscribe from the list or send it to Gmail or something like that when you're not going to be in town, if your company requires you to send out messages or what have you. So the question is, and I would invite people to come up to the microphone with ideas about this, we kind of kicked around the idea of just trimming it down to anything that sends an auto response. Drop them off the list. It's not a drop with any kind of prejudice or anything, and Randy's going to correct me on some portion of this. And you're welcome to come back as soon as that situation is remedied. But you know, it would be, you know, it's sort of something that you wonder: will TMDA all of a sudden get huge amount of mind share? Will 20% of the list go on vacation some August, and then all of a sudden you have this real. So if anybody has ideas about how to address this, I'd really welcome hearing them.
Just a bit of history. We did discuss this extensively in the San Jose open meeting. There was agreement on essentially the philosophy behind this wording. The SC does not feel very good about having pushed it back to the MLC when the community essentially agreed on it. But the SC felt, and the SC, after some discussion, essentially supported it entirely. Some people initially, everybody eventually. But the issue was brought up is this was too specific and is going to get language lawyer attack. So just moderate it down stuff, and we'd like to get somewhat, TMDA or any other autoresponder, et cetera, et cetera. The SC really has no problem with this. We were just worried about the language lawyer attack.
So since there isn't a line forming at the microphone, I'd like to ask for a show of hands. Who would be opposed to compacting this so that it just said that subscribers who have some sort of auto response to mail sent to the list are subject to being removed from the list and may resubscribe without prejudice or any kind of negative connotation being attached to that at such time as the auto response is gone. Does anyone have a problem with that sort of setup? Is anyone in favor of that sort of setup? Okay, we will reword that and discuss it among the mailing list committee, send it to NANOG Futures and thence to the steering committee, and hopefully have something, hopefully have a box for Jared to stand on.
Excellent. Yes, so will they receive notice why they've been unsubscribed? Okay.
Okay, so, well, okay, all right. Well, okay, so what if somebody has TMDA with half a dozen CAPTCHAs that we have to go through in order to do that?
We sent the mail. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Whenever we remove anybody from the mailing list for any reason, we send them an email letting them know why.
Marty. Because the answer is yes. Okay. Anything else? Castigations, obscenities?
Jeff? Okay, I'll speak for Jeff. He came up and he said something interesting to me on the side. He said, should actually be congratulated. The usefulness of the NANOG list is in time.
Jeff clearly does not download enough pornography or wares.
I wouldn't know. I left Usenet in '86.
Randy, can you repeat your comment? The microphone cut out.
Is this a bug or a feature? Okie doke. Next is scheduled to be, this laptop's big enough I don't need the screen, right? Next is scheduled to be open. There are 3 positions becoming vacant on the steering committee in alphabetic order. Jared, Philip, and Randy. There are 6 candidates, again in alphabetic order. Hank, Joe, Philip, Randy, Steve, and Vince. Pardon? Oh, that's a different Joe. We're keeping that Joe. He's been doing an excellent job. And he did such a good job, we're working on adding another Joe since Joe's seem to work. If you're in the security area, it's Steve's. Maybe in NANOG, it's going to be Joe's. That's because there's so many Joe jobs. The electronic voting will start at 1300 tomorrow. This is EDT. I'm sorry for you real operators who think in GMT. And will end Tuesday at 1500 so they can announce it at the end of the meeting. EDT. That's Eastern Daylight Savings Time. That's one time zone to the east of us. That is what it says on the website. I copied it. As I said, if I had written it, it would be in GMT. And then people would bitch at me that I didn't say UCT. But anyway, UTC. UCT. Okay, now let's back up a little. Okie doke. Yes, ma'am. Right, we're trying to do that. Okie doke. And you have to go through this whole new password ritual, et cetera, et cetera. If you manage to register for this NANOG, you're somewhat familiar with it, as Betty says. A practice run wouldn't hurt. God knows they're going to get hit. I had to do it today and find out my own password, so it is hidden there. What you do is go through it and give up. Don't give it the password, and then it tells you how to get your password back. So we've all been through here before, right? I can build this highway, but I can't drive a car. Okie doke. The opportunity for, just understand, the program committee will be selected, the replacements on the program committee will be selected by the new steering committee, and nominations are still opened, encouraged, and begged for that. Okay? And Steve Feldman is lead victim for that at the moment. Okay? One of the charter amendments that is proposed is a complex one, and that is regarding the overlap of steering committee and program committee. We have a significant number of members who are on the steering committee today who are also on the program committee. So when it came time to choose the program committee, it turned out to be a very small number of people doing that. So there's a three-choice proposal on the charter. One choice is overlap is forbidden. Second choice is it's open season. Third choice is, I think, overlap cannot be more than two people. Okay? So your opinion there would be interesting and, in fact, will be the rule. So it's whichever of those gets the highest vote. The rest of the stuff's all pretty vanilla and just cleanup stuff. Would anybody who is in that second enumeration care to speak in there, or anybody else's favor or disfavor? It's open. The charter specifically says that there is time at this meeting for the candidates to speak. So they don't. Right. And I've spoken enough already. Pardon? Right. But I'm saying I'm going to refrain because you've heard too much from me already. There, Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Gibbard. I've hugged the mic too much already talking about mailing list stuff, so I will just say that other than that, I am pretty happy with the status quo and am willing to do this if you elect me, and thanks.
Vince, I haven't seen yet. The other Joe's hiding somewhere over there. We'll embarrass you out. Come on, Joe. All right. We'll all vote for Ren's husband.
I've been doing this stuff longer than I've been married to her, so that, whatever. I'm Joe Provo. Hi. I haven't hugged the mic that much, but I'm not going to right now, in deference to people actually wanting to like eat and things. I build things and I run networks, and I am interested in, helping the infrastructure of the organization that's helped me do the building of networks and running of things keep going. That's pretty much it.
Ankus, you haven't shown, have you? No?
Seeing everybody saying something, I should say something too. I'm Philip Smith. Served a year on the steering committee so far. I guess I bring an international flavor, at least a non-North American flavor to this. I've spent far too much time in apricots, sanogs, pecnogs, and goodness what other nogs. The serious part is, I do bring experience from other operations groups. I've enjoyed my year in the steering committee. If you'd like me to serve another couple of years, I'm happy to do that. If not, I'm happy for whoever else wants to do so. Thanks very much.
Then I'm going to blather for a few minutes, not about me, because if you're smart, all of these other people are as or better qualified. But I want to tell you a little about the steering committee, actually. There's been what? Okay. Noise from in front, noise from behind. Who wins? The steering committee has been an interesting experience because it's been a very delicate balance in cooperation between the community with an idea of autonomy and what happened a couple years back with the evolution or revolution or whatever you call it, and merit as actually holding rights and data for the idea of what NANOG is, and actually doing a lot of the work and we're very thankful to them. And it's been a very interesting balance in cooperation and consensus, and very delicate. And the process has only hit a couple speed bumps, and we've survived them. I think Betty especially needs to be thanked for having the vision of the cooperation of the community. I think NANOG represents and is one of the last cultures that represents the competitor yet cooperation of the old internet, where we all have to make this thing work even though our marketing people are stabbing each other in the back. And I think the relationship with Merit has also exemplified that. And I think we've had a very constructive and cooperative, good start to this change in organization that is the steering committee and the way NANOG's running now. And I think credit goes to all those people that have participated, from the program committee, the mailing list committee, the steering committee, Merit, and the community. And whoever you choose, I think from that list of candidates will be really good folk. Let me just speak for two other people, Vince and Hank. Hank has been an operator and organized Knox and organized engineering teams for a little while, and Vince even longer. Both are old operations dogs, though Vince has recently sold out to a vendor. We'll forgive him. Everybody else has kind of spoken for themselves. You can ask questions of the candidates. You can throw tomatoes. Anybody else want to speak to this issue? Darn, we're going to make the party. Pardon? Oh, yeah, and Jared chose not to re-up. And he's probably the wisest one. But definitely thanks, Jared. It was a pleasure working with you. And this is the most significant question to me, which is back to just like the mailing list. What can we as a community do to make the mailing list more useful? What can we do to make these meetings more useful? Are there other media we should be using, like the wiki is starting to get some popularity, et cetera? What can we as a community, and what do you want from the victims that you've put up here on these various committees to do to make NANOG more useful? I'm sure we were all both somewhat honest and yet somewhat disappointed and wistful when almost no hands went up at the question Betty asked about, can you live without the NANOG mailing list? 5 or 8 years ago, the answer would have been quite different. Why? Do we want to change that? Hey, Ren. Pardon? That's on the charter. Mailing list member term limits, and the process for selecting them is on the charter proposed. It's votable tomorrow. You want me to review the charter, the charter proposals? By the way, Dan Golding deserves 5 points for not being on any committee and doing yeoman work on getting the charter together. But just a sec. Oops, Dan's on the program committee. See, I'm a liar too, so do not vote for me. Just a sec. I'm going to have to fish around to find this. Oh, was it there? Which one? Ballot 06? NANOG illegible charter amendments. I can probably do something like this and make it bigger and still illegible. Okay, steering committee elections, and the original one had bootstrap language in it, et cetera, and it had words in it like to elect the first steering committee. and things like that. But things are essentially the same other than striking out that language and putting in electronic voting stuff. Aha, somebody knows. Woo.
Increase, Control plus.
That's readable.
Woo, psychedelic. There we go. So cleaning up the SC election, okay, most of it's just process and also removal of, to elect the first steering committee. So it's removal of startup stuff. No real structural change that you will care about, I don't think. Mailing list administrators, major change, because it essentially makes it the same as the program committee. Both the mailing list committee and the program committee are appointed by the steering committee. But what it says is that there are 2-year staggered terms and there are term limits, et cetera, just like the program committee. The only difference, and those are just like the steering committee, except that the steering committee is elected where the other two are appointed by the steering committee. So it essentially makes them all parallel, takes out all the startup language, stuff like that. Puts in term limits, et cetera. Want to speak to that at all, Rand? Meet your needs? Yeah, we tried to do it. We tried. We really tried. Yes, sir.
It may make sense to, I was just going to say, it may make sense just to articulate some of the motivating points behind that, because I think they're motivated by good reasons, not bad reasons.
Indeed, it may make sense to do so.
I was trying to prod Randy to get to the point that he's made before that I really agree with, and that is, if there's a light at the end of the tunnel, a known termination point, then it may allow people not to get burned out knowing that they can survive just for 3 months more, just for 2 months more, just for 1 more month. And that really resonated with me, and I think this makes a lot of sense.
There were two halves to it. One is when... And in those 2 days, he has 2 7:30 breakfast meetings, 2 lunch meetings, et cetera. So, and much whining we get from the mailing list committee that they get stuck with a breakfast meeting, by the way. And they have my sympathies, except I have a 6:30 phone call before that. But anyway, the other half of that is that, somebody feeling like they want out knows there's a natural end to the term, and also the steering committee that thinks somebody should be feeling that way has a natural end to their term with no penalty, no foul, right? So it just makes it clean and simple. So both those committees have just normal terms, term limits, et cetera, the stuff you've come to expect, love, and have too much process wrapped around. Does existing time served count towards your term limit? Yes, existing time served does count towards the term limit. So, for instance, for the steering committee people, those people who are re-apping, this will be their last term, if they're reelected. And the same thing goes to the mailing list committee, if appointed by the steering committee. It's all parallel, right? And no, you do not get extra time based on the number of messages you have to read on the mailing list. And then there's this thing I described earlier, which was the steering committee exclusivity, okay? And so you have 3 choices: prohibit overlap entirely, limit overlap to no more than 2 members, or the charter does permit dual membership. No, I won't prejudice it. Anybody want to comment on any of those? Like many things, by the way, that the steering committee's done, we kind of did the minimum we thought we could do. Steve?
I'm curious to hear how the people who are currently on both the steering committee and the program committee feel about the exclusivity thing.
I am not in that category. Philip is. Hey, Joe's an eloquent one, yeah.
It's, I'll let's turn around. That's better. Of the 2 of them, the steering committee is the more work, because there's a meeting every other, telephone meeting every 2 weeks. The steering committee, there isn't. There's 2 phone calls just before each meeting, and a bit of review of slides and things like that. So the PC is definitely less work. I actually was the one who proposed that there should be no overlap between the two of them because I just think the spirit of the original charter was such that there should be a division. And I thought that made sense, and that was the reason for having, for example, the chair of the PC sitting ex officio on the SC to give that overlap. I don't think you particularly need additional people to serve on both. I've said before that I'm quite happy to do both if I can be useful. But I think the charter is probably better served by just having one. That's my personal opinion. I think there are three or four people at the moment who are on both. Chris is on both?
It's two of you, you and Chris. And from a purely personal point of view, I'd like to say that although I was a bit concerned at first, I think it's worked out really well having the two of you on both because you both contribute much valuable work to both committees. So from my point of view, it's not been a problem at all.
The problem actually was first felt seriously when the steering committee had to decide, many moons ago, a year ago, on the program committee members who were also on the steering committee who wished to re-up on the program committee. And what it did was it left it, so since they could not participate in that decision, we didn't feel it was appropriate for them to participate in that decision. So they had to be completely left out of it. There was a separate mailing list for it and a separate pair of phone calls, et cetera. And the problem, and actually we didn't mind that at all, and it's fine, it's just a stupid process, you go through it. The problem was that we were a little worried that what happened was we ended up with three members of the steering committee that were not in that dual position, having to make a decision for a significant portion of the program committee. And we were worried that the membership might feel that this was too small a group making that decision. And since the last speaker felt comfortable expressing his opinion, I don't care which of these. I can operate with any of them. Daniel.
Yeah. A couple quick points as well. Already in the charter, there's a line between the mailing list committee and the steering committee. You can't actually serve on both. So that division is already there. And the other value that comes in when you separate the SC and the PC is there's some value in having the greatest pool of volunteers possible. In other words, having the greatest number of people in the community who wish to participate in the process be able to participate in the process. And if we keep things sort of exclusive between the SC and the PC, that maximizes the number of volunteers who can actually participate, just like keeping the mailing list committee separate. So I guess I've shown what my opinion is. So.
I don't know how much of the poor communication over the last years between the mailing list committee and the steering committee might be ascribed to the lack of overlap. Because the only dual membership is actually the merit representative. And the merit people, specifically Betty in particular, or Sue, are very careful not to act strongly. So we've had, and as I said, could be none of it's due to that, could be significant, don't know. We've had great with the program committee, and some of that's due to the fact that, hey, Joe, how'd that work out? Hey, Steve, how'd that work out?
One of the things that the program committee has is the chair is an ex officio member of the steering committee. Since we're standardizing the mailing list committee term limits and we're looking at standardizing the separation requirement for the program committee, one suggestion in terms of improving communication might be to put the chair of the mailing list committee as an ex officio member of the steering committee.
I would guess that the steering committee, if that's the decision that the membership makes to not have overlap, pardon me, mailing list stays the same. So I would guess that it might be interesting to have the steering committee get a mailing list committee member on the ex officio steering committee. Good point. cruising. Marty, fulfill your role. Come throw things. With the new stuff, you can't have carry rotten fruit on the plane anymore. Bummer. We were counting on you. It's a wrap. Thank you all.